It began on a night like no other, where the air carried a peculiar stillness, thick and heavy, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Ava tightened her scarf, her boots crunching against the frost-covered gravel as she walked the desolate road leading to the old house on Ashford Hill. The house, abandoned for decades, loomed in the distance, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring into the void. Everyone in the small town whispered about Ashford Hill, the place where shadows lingered too long, and voices that didn't belong to anyone seemed to echo in the dead of night. Ava, a journalist with an appetite for uncovering the mysterious, had heard enough of the tales to know she had to see it for herself. But now, as she approached the crooked gate, unease settled over her like a second skin. The gate groaned as she pushed it open, the sound slicing through the silence. Her flashlight flickered momentarily, casting distorted shadows on the skeletal trees around her. Ava muttered a curse under her breath, shaking the flashlight until its beam steadied. "Not tonight," she whispered, half to herself, half to the trembling device. The front door was ajar, its paint peeling like ancient skin. She hesitated. Something about the darkness inside the house seemed alive. Still, she stepped forward, her resolve hardened by curiosity and just a hint of defiance against the fear curling in her chest. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet as she crossed the threshold. The air inside was colder, carrying the faint scent of mildew and something else, something metallic. Blood? No. She shook the thought away. Her flashlight illuminated the room ahead. A grand foyer, its walls adorned with faded wallpaper and a staircase spiraling into the abyss above. Dust motes danced in the light, but there was an odd rhythm to their movement, as if guided by an unseen force. "Is anyone here?" Ava's voice echoed, swallowed by the oppressive silence. No answer. Just the faint hum of the wind sneaking through cracks in the walls. She moved deeper into the house, her pulse quickening with every step. Then she heard a faint, melodic humming. It was soft, almost comforting, but entirely out of place. Ava froze, her breath hitching as the sound grew louder. It seemed to be coming from the room to her left. She turned the doorknob slowly, every nerve in her body screaming at her to run, but she couldn't stop. She had to know. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit parlor. A grand piano stood in the corner, its keys yellowed with age, but it was the figure seated at the piano that made her heart slam against her ribs. A woman, draped in a tattered dress that shimmered like cobwebs under moonlight, played a haunting tune. Her face was obscured by long, raven-black hair, but her fingers moved with an unnatural grace over the keys. "Excuse me?" Ava managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stopped playing. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, she turned her head toward Ava, revealing hollow sockets where eyes should have been. Ava staggered back, her flashlight trembling in her grasp. "You shouldn't be here." The woman's voice was a guttural rasp, layered with echoes as if a dozen voices spoke in unison. The air grew colder, the metallic scent intensifying. Ava backed away, her mind screaming at her legs to run, but they felt rooted to the floor. Suddenly, the piano began to play itself. The melody now, a chaotic, discordant cacophony. The walls seemed to close in, the room warping and bending like a surreal painting. Shadows spilled from the corners, twisting and writhing toward her. Ava turned and bolted, her flashlight swinging wildly as she raced for the front door. But the house wasn't done with her. The hallway stretched endlessly before her, the door now a distant speck. Her breaths came in ragged gasps as whispers surrounded her, their words unintelligible but filled with malice. She tripped, her flashlight clattering to the floor and rolling away, its beam cutting a path through the darkness. Crawling on her hands and knees, Ava reached for it, but her fingers froze as she saw the beam illuminate a pair of feet bare, pale, and standing, impossibly still. She looked up slowly. The woman from the piano loomed over her, her eyeless face twisted into a grotesque grin. "You wanted to uncover the truth," she hissed. "Now you'll never leave it." The last thing Ava saw was the woman's outstretched hand, skeletal fingers reaching for her as the darkness swallowed everything. Days later, the townsfolk noticed Ava's car abandoned near Ashford Hill. No one dared to enter the house to look for her, but on quiet nights, when the wind was just right, they swore they could hear the faint sound of a piano, a voice humming a haunting melody, beckoning anyone brave or foolish enough to listen. Weeks turned into months, and the mystery of Ava's disappearance began to fade into whispered legends. Yet for some, the story wasn't over. Her younger brother Ethan, a skeptic with a fierce determination, refused to let the mystery rest. Armed with a recording device, a flashlight, and a journal Ava had left behind, he set out for Ashford Hill. The journal contained fragmented entries filled with Ava's thoughts about the house. "There's something wrong here," one entry read. "It's as if the house is alive, watching, waiting." The stories might be more than just tales. Ethan scoffed, but couldn't ignore the chill running down his spine. The closer he got to the house, the more oppressive the air became. The same crooked gate greeted him, its rusted hinges moaning in protest. The house loomed larger than he had imagined, a monolith of decay and dread. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Ethan called out Ava's name, his voice swallowed by the same eerie silence Ava had encountered. He moved cautiously, every creak of the floorboards amplifying his unease. The grand foyer was just as Ava had described, but something felt off. The air seemed heavier, and the shadows clung to the corners like living things. Ethan's flashlight swept across the room, landing on a photo frame lying shattered on the floor. He picked it up, his heart pounding as he recognized Ava in the photograph, standing beside an unfamiliar figure. The figure's face was obscured, blurred, as if by some malevolent force. Beneath the photo was a note scrawled in Ava's handwriting. "Don't trust the music." As he ascended the staircase, a faint melody reached his ears. It was the piano, playing the same haunting tune Ava had described. Ethan's grip on his flashlight tightened, and he forced himself to move toward the sound. The parlor door was slightly ajar, and the melody grew louder with every step. Inside the parlor, the grand piano stood as if waiting for him. The keys moved on their own, and the room seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Ethan felt a presence behind him and turned abruptly, but there was nothing there. He approached the piano cautiously, his recording device capturing the eerie melody. Then, the humming began. It was soft at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, wrapping around him like a suffocating shroud. The room darkened, the walls twisting and contorting. Ethan tried to run, but his legs felt like lead. The humming turned into whispers, and then into a deafening roar. Out of the shadows emerged the woman, her eyeless face fixed on Ethan. "You've come to take her place," she rasped, her voice echoing with an otherworldly cadence. Ethan screamed, his flashlight flickering wildly. He stumbled backward, his recording device falling to the floor. The woman advanced, her skeletal hand reaching for him. In a desperate move, Ethan grabbed the journal from his bag and hurled it at her. The pages scattered, and the woman paused, her form flickering as if destabilized. "Ava!" Ethan shouted, his voice breaking. "Where are you?" The room erupted in chaos. The piano's melody turned discordant, the keys smashing down violently. The walls seemed to collapse inward, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness. Ethan's vision blurred as he felt himself being pulled toward the void. And then, everything went silent. Ethan woke up outside the house, the dawn breaking over the horizon. He gasped for air, his body trembling. In his hand was Ava's journal, but the pages were blank. His recording device lay beside him, its battery drained. He stumbled to his car, unable to shake the feeling that he was being watched. Back in town, Ethan played back the recording. The audio was distorted, filled with static and faint whispers. But one sound stood out. Ava's voice, faint but clear, saying, "Don't let it take you too." Ethan knew he couldn't return to Ashford Hill, but the mystery of the house continued to haunt him. He couldn't escape the feeling that Ava was still there, trapped in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to bring her home.